Hi, good evening, everyone. For the last time, this is our final session here today in Podium 3. We have Reduce Noise by Understanding Your Digital Risk by TM1. And elaborating this topic would be Mr. Radilufti bin Madehi, who is the Assistant General Manager of MSSP and CSS Cluster, Innovative Solutions. I don't want to waste any more time. Again, thank you for joining us, and thank you if you've been tuning in for every Podium 3. I would like to begin the presentation. Um, Hope you enjoy.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and good day to everybody. Salam sejahtera, and hope everyone is in a good condition. First of all, I would like to say thank you for joining us in this session. What we are going to go through today is a little bit of cybersecurity enlightening session. The topic today is how you reduce noise by understanding your digital risks. Before we start, let me introduce myself. My name is Radi. I'm from TM1. I'm the head of network security and MSSP. So, without further ado, let's get it on. Okay. Um, I would like to put things into a little bit of perspective here. Photography, visualization, risks, cybersecurity, and the one thing in common is noise. So, to zoom in for a much better perspective, in photography, noise is basically a grainy veil of an image. So it is an obscured details in making a particular picture appear to be significantly worse. In some cases, photos can be so noisy that in the end, they are essentially unusable. So let me just put some highlights into understanding these words. So in this picture, number one, as you can see, at a glance, this is a picture of Milky Way. Anyway, at a glance, the picture seems very nice. You would be able to see the details. You would be able to see certain structure to it and some of the graphics into different perspective. But in reality, the quality of this picture or image is quite distorted. What you can see here is actually a noisy visuals. So on the other hand, in picture 2, as you can see, with less noise, or we call it noise free, it is clearer, it is crispier, with more in-depth of subjects as well as detailed representation. So from here, what happens is actually with lesser exposure stacking, there seems to be a lot of noise in the structure of the image itself. With multiple exposure stacking, we would be able to see, we tend to actually reduce the construction of noise in the picture, which makes the picture more abstract, which makes the picture more identifiable in terms of its clarity and the details of its individual structure. So likewise in cybersecurity, it has a huge impact when you talk about noise in the domain of cybersecurity. And most people ask me, what's the big deal? So identifying noise, it's all about ensuring your security teams can capture the actionable threat insights. So what does it mean by these actionable threats insight? So it's all about predict, prevent, detect, and response. So this is part of Gartner adaptive security architecture. When you deal with this noise in a right way, you would be able to predict better sense of likelihood, meaning you can anticipate the attacker motivations. You would be able to know why they are doing it. And in prevention, you would have better control in measures. You would be able to obstruct the attackers from achieving their objectives on coming up with all these bad intentions. Thirdly, detection. You would be able to accurately identify the signs and all the malicious activities. You will be able to interpret it effectively. Last but not least is respond. It takes faster time to mitigate, which you would be able to reduce the risk, losses of your potential losses of your company, and then you will be able to quickly recover and restore to normal business. So in other perspective, when people look into the adaptive security architecture from Gartner, it's like having multiple stacking of exposure in photography. If you are able to identify this clearly and differentiate which one is relevant, which one is meaningful to an organization or to your esteemed company, for example, you can effectively increase the clarity of how you want to do things after this, or how you want to mitigate after this, and how you want to respond, react to deal with such a situation. So, coming back to the objectives, the real thing about this is actually to ensure you are enabling your team to focus on the right alerts without letting any threats slip by. Um, Here, I would like to share one quote from Jan Johnson, which is the Homeland Security of United States, from the United States. What he said is actually cybersecurity is a shared responsibility, and it boils down to this. In cybersecurity, the more systems we secure means the more secure we are. Likewise, even though you have all this perspective of protection, but the more you work on your protection, the more you enhance your visualization, the visibility, the monitoring with the help of your counterparts, your partners, and even I may say your principal or providers. Um, you are actually increasing by lessening the potential of threats into your organization. So let us crunch some numbers here. As you can see, 500 million, what is this? Revenue, potential GDP to the growth of the country? I hope so. Unfortunately, it is not. This number represents the cybercrime statistics for in 2018 and 2019. So it is actually an economic impact on cybersecurity incidents and crimes, totaling up to an alarming of almost 500 million ringgit in losses within 2019. And you'll be surprised if you ask me. I am absolutely scared in understanding what's happening right now. This is the current situation. When COVID disease started back in 2019, for the first 3 months of the pandemic, threats detected during this pandemic have increased by 108%. Just imagine, guys, with the number that we have previously, which is about 500 million, an increase of 108% to the whole amount is actually, I have lots of words for that, but it is really, really, really bad and frightening. So, By so the situation, we need to understand what is going on. We need to understand what are the risks that is actually taking part, and we need to understand the digital risk that we ourselves are involved, whether it's individual, whether it's a SMEs, whether it's a corporate companies, whether it's a conglomerate. It is there and it is real. So understanding your digital risk is actually all about the environment around you, the transformation of the digital asset that's being exposed in your organization to attackers. It can be shadow IT, it can be your social media, it can be your mobile applications, it can be just a simple forums or a code sharing sites or even file sharing sites. So all this is actually a supply chain between you, your customers, and your partners. Adversaries taking advantage of exposures, use of your weaknesses, exposing data, impersonation, then you start to implement things like a framework. Well, that works. For example, MITRE ATT&CK frameworks and others that can help you to provide common understanding of language where security teams can give you or can gain some insights on that. But first, you need to understand how does these things impact you and associated to you. So in a digital risk, what really transpired is actually a threat, um, adversaries or an actor. You need to understand its personal traits. You need to understand its behavior, the tactics, the techniques, and the procedures. On top of that, there are opportunities available to the threat actor that you need to um, explore into. So these actors or threat adversaries, they are taking these opportunities with an intention of exploitation. I'll give you a few examples of unwanted exposures. Like I mentioned earlier on, they can be repositories. It can be a misconfigured of online file sharing services. It can be a paste sites, social media, like I mentioned just now. It can be a criminal forums that someone has mistakenly went into. It can be your staff unintentionally went into. It can be dark web pages. So there are actually a few ways of mitigating all these risks. It started from um, technical, whereby attack surface reduction can happen, removal of offending content that you can actually do, maybe network blocking. If you work closely with your telco or a network provider, it can even be operational, something like a implement of monitoring strategy, integration with incident response processes, or even embedding in security operation. And to the least of that, it can even be strategic, updating risks and threat models, as well as measuring or managing the report of your digital assets directly. So let us understand a little bit more what these risks are. There are actually three types of digital risk categories that may impact you directly. So, what each individual organization do, or each individual proprietary may be doing, or a corporate entity may be doing, we need to deliberate and understand further the risk that really meant to you and really associated to you. In these three main categories, I'm going to go through in brief about brand and reputation, about business disruption, as well as online fraud. In in brand and reputation, there is unauthorized use of brands. These are something like websites, social profiles of your company, content that belongs to you, made available in social networks or other platforms, as well as a corporate identity platform, which is supplant to your identity through an unauthorized use of brand, logo, and image. This is one of a kind example normally a threat actor would use to falsify your presence. Two, suspicious domains. This is common. Web domains that are due to their similarity with your legitimate domain. So what they did is actually cyber squatting. They can typo squatting. They can use your preferentials, credentials in the future to supplant you, to be like you, for the purpose of simply phishing or constructing malware attacks against your organization. The third one, when you talk about brand, is content. So, offensive content is another means of digital risk that an organization um, may face. So, offensive content happens in publications. They do offensive publications on user opinions against your organization, with regards to your products, with regards to your brand, that may pose a risk to the reputation and trust of your company towards your customer with your specific brand and products. And this happens quite uh, seldom, if I may say, even in Malaysia or countries surrounding Malaysia. Fourth, counterfeit. This is another means of an unauthorized website or social profiles uh, that pretend to be an official distribution of a channel for your company. So what they did is actually they have products, they have counterfeit products, they made replicas, they made second-hand products that are available, which looks like you, but it's not you. Last but not least, things that can actually affect your brand and reputation is digital identity monitoring. These guys basically represent fake profiles, uh, publish personal data, offensive content, criticism, defamation, but they did this in specific of a targeted user. For example, the VIPs, the C level of your companies, the executives, and then using their profile and ID to make an expose uh, remarks, to make an expose public announcement, and even making sound decision whereby it is not actually done by the right person. Okay, so that is brand and reputation. Now let's jump to another sector, which is business disruption. This has a direct impact to your business needs, to your business outcome, and to the business results. So, in business disruption, people talk about data exposure, people talk about hacktivism, people talk about activism, people talk about breach of security controls, and even credential theft. With just these few examples, for in the likes of data exposure, is something like a website or a base platforms, um, or content on social networks, as well as publication content containing sensitive or confidential information about your organization that should not be published, which in the end is published. So, from the internet, these are most common things that happen with confidential documents, corporate emails, documents with sensitive metadata being wrongly published, whether it's from internal or whether it's actually being scrubbed from your internal network through the use of specific programming or specific targets. In the likes of breach of security, for example, the publications or tutorials of videos that belongs to your company that actually have some flaws is actually being used over and over again just for the purpose of making bad impression about how you run your business, how you operate, which actually in the midst of maybe some enhancement, but it is actually being published out into the public network. If you look into credential theft in this manner, these are actually pretty much common. Corporate emails, especially which associated with password, which associated password are being publicized, exposed onto websites and paste platforms, as well as compromised credentials collected by botnets, which corresponds to the excess of these threat actors. So we've come to our last categories, that is online fraud. And I believe this is nothing new to each and every one of you. And I believe some of you may even encounter this. I myself have personally encountered this. So online fraud involves phishing, malware. Carding is a little bit uncommon here in Malaysia, but it does happen. And of course, last but not least are the suspicious mobile apps. As you know, phishing is one of the threats likely to result in a fraudulent action against an organization interest. This is where websites pretend to be an official sites of your organization in order to confuse users and steal their access credentials and other confidential data. So what I'm trying to say here is basically they use something of a similarity in your presence, but it's actually being crafted and designed to their own interest and crafted and designed to their own intention of this bad and negative reaction. On top of that, for example, in malware, they targeted a relate which relates directly to an organization, and this can be a URLs breach, it can be IP addresses, it can be domain names or trademarks. So we touch a little bit, on carding. Carding is with regards to bank cards, or it can be loyalty cards that carries value into it. So compromised bank cards due to infected point of sales or that are being offered from underground card buying and selling markets, which they use to make illegal transaction and purchase. And in suspicious mobile apps, this is where an unofficial mobile applications related to your organization, they may change one letter, they may change the whole uh, strings of connection to the applications. It may change the whole the links from the applications uh, to be published both officially or in alternate markets with the possible objectives of confusing your clients, your customer to obtain a gain. It's all about credentials, it's all about data, and in the end, what they want is actually to construct illegitimate transactions. So next, how basically we can monitor thousands of sources on the web surface and having the ability to monitor and understand the capabilities beyond our understanding. So, in order to establish all the specific means of risk associated to you, we need to enrich our source findings, especially in our monitoring capabilities. Here, there are three commonly used cyber threat intel sources. One, the surface web. Two, deep web. Three, dark web. Surface web is actually where the variety of actors of low capabilities, social pages like Google, the rest of the other search engine, which you can actually simply just type and enter into it. And then popular networks. So things, for example, like what I can tell you, search engine of social networks, generic internet channels. It can be a domain registrars. It can be a market for mobile application. These are some few examples of surface webs. Number two, deep web. This is a web member-only hacking forums for cyber criminals. It includes insights for tools, services, for patch exploitation. Examples of these are like intentional or accidental leaks that happens, underground networks for credentials and credit cards, and it can be the black markets for the buy and sell uh, of sites. And the last one is actually dark web. Dark web is where a marketplace or shops that are hosted to do transactions that are pretty much or all illegal. So the transactions are to purchase goods, services, credentials, IPs. For example, dark webs are like onion sites, private and unauthenticated forums. So what I'm trying to share here is basically once you understand the details, confidentiality of your data are within these three environments, you would be able to ensure how you want to secure it, how you want to protect it, and of course, the next best thing is what do you want to do about it and what can you do about it. So now you have understood in pretty much perspective of your digital risk. What's next? So the next part, or in this particular point, what I would like to share with you is what can you do about it. So first things, generating and formulating all the good intels, all the three intels coming from the surface web, from the dark web, and from the deep web. You need to put it to full use. How can you do this? Processing techniques. So what happens during processing techniques? So normally when you work with a security service provider, or it can even be your internal security team, what happens in processing techniques are queries that happens in the public sources. Now there can be queries that happens in private sources. They can also be queries in your own sources, and that is really important because 70% out of research, some threats are really actually happening from internal. On top of that, what you need to do with this intelligence is that you would be able to sometimes analyze, or you want to analyze in sandbox. You want to analyze private antivirus. You even want to go to the extent of analyzing your machine learning if it's actually related to you. And last but not least, what happened within the processing techniques are genetic analysis. This is where you will be able to see the whole ecosystem and the holistic view of what's going to happen or what needs to be taken. Next, capabilities. So in capabilities, this is where you take measures from the malicious verdict. You take the understanding of extraction of indicators of incidents, the behavioral telemetry in terms of your threat actors or adversaries, the real objectives of why they're doing it. By understanding those, then you will be able to actually really respond and how you want to respond. Uh, Fourth, you would like to understand the malware family of identification, what types of malware, how long they have been there, where it's coming from, the origin of it, and last but not least, of course, the threat attribution. So By understanding these two uh, specific attributes, only then and now you're going to the next step of enabling yourself to mitigate and to respond. There are few things that you can do during mitigation and response, like closing resources used to commit fraud against you or your customers. This is where you would be able to close websites or impersonate that impersonates you or commit fraud, like phishing, removal of unauthorized content, like a withdrawal of unofficial mobile applications or sites, removals of false advertising or campaigns that actually relates to you, which was actually not established or published by you, or sometimes removal of content from videos like YouTube. Those are some few things that you can actually do with regards to protecting your digital risk. Last but not least, closing resources that supplant your identity. So this is pretty much where you close down websites that your corporate identity has been infringed with your intellectual property rights, and removal of unofficial modules like applications that supplement to your ID, and of course, removal of fake profiles and identity to your social networks. And of course, another thing is actually profiles and specific credentials of your VIPs. This is how, when we talk about mitigating and eliminating, some of the few key things that you would be able or you would love to see how digital risk is to be dealt. But again, like I said, you need to understand what really happens in like I mentioned in my previous slide. So before I leave, I would like to summarize a little bit that when you understand digital risk, you are pretty much understanding or knowing your enemy. The importance of this intelligence comes in normally in four stages. There are strategic intel, there are operational intel, there are tactical intel, and there are also technical intel. So I hope we have time, maybe in other sessions in future, that I would be able to help and share with you how does this work. So just a quick summary. Hope you enjoy this session and it gives you meaningful insights that may help you in discovering some of those potential threats that you've been facing, or some of those threats that you might be facing, and how can you actually react towards it. So again, with that, I would like to thank you very much. And again, before I go, I just like to say uh, we in TM1 would really love if you come to us and ask us and help you how you can really identify your digital risk and how you can actually do that possible protection. So with that, I thank you very much. Good day, be safe, stay safe. Goodbye. Thank you.
You're welcome, Mr. Radi. And as he said, if only we had a bit more time, he could end further. But I'm sure he'll be joining us in other events and other podiums. So I would like to close with no questions here today. I would like to close this event. I would like to close this podium for the whole day, actually, because this is the last event we have here today. Of course, I'll be joining you tomorrow for another 5 podium sessions. But on behalf of CYDES, once again, I'd like to thank everyone here present, everyone who came and engaged in this session with us. And yeah, I'll see you all tomorrow. Stay safe, everyone. Goodbye.